All right, welcome everybody to a lunch and learn, or slightly after lunch and learn event if you're in the Eastern Time Zone. At DNA, today we're presenting streamlining your Sage 300 budgeting process. And today, along with myself, Will Booth at DNA, we are lucky enough to have George Braun, the president of True Sky Budgeting and Planning Software, on the line with us. Welcome, George.
Thank you, Will.
We're going to go through just an overview of who True Sky is and what the True Sky budgeting and planning software does, and then George is going to give us a demonstration of how we can streamline our processes in Sage 300 when it comes to budgeting and planning. We have several clients that are using this product and have had great success, and more coming on all the time. So I will hand the baton over to George. Just a note to everyone, I am recording this webinar, so I will be sharing it after the event ends. We'll send out an after webinar email and provide a link to a YouTube video of this session. So if anybody has any questions, please just put them in the chat window, and I'll answer them if I can right in the chat window. Otherwise, we'll ask George at the end of the presentation. So feel free to put whatever questions you have in there. And if you everybody seems to be connected, so I'll put the dial-in number in the chat window in case people are having any problem with their headset or anything. But I should take about 45 minutes, I think, to go through this, George?
Yeah, probably a little bit less, hopefully. But
yeah, okay. So once we're done, yeah, we'll do Q&A at the end. So George, I am going to hand you the baton here.
Okay.
And I'll let you know when we can see your screen. I see your screen.
Okay. All right, perfect. So I'm assuming everybody else can see my screen.
Yep.
Yeah. So my name is George Braun. I'll be giving you guys just a high-level overview of True Sky and kind of how we can help you streamline your budgeting process with your Sage 300. Basically, the way my presentation is done, excuse me for a second, is we've broken things up into three separate pillars, which is kind of the three main pillars we thought are really important in budgeting. So the first one, our first pillar, actually, first of all, just at a high level, True Sky is a corporate performance management solution. So we're a CPM tool, which basically means we help you with your budgeting, forecasting processes. Okay, but we also do reporting and we add a whole bunch of other controls as well. So my presentation is going to be basically broken up into three separate pillars. So the first pillar is really ease of use. And this is a screen we like because, as we know, everybody loves budgeting, which, in the real world, it would be nice, but the reality is most people don't really like budgeting. So the easier we make it for them, the better. So one of our big goals, and when we're building our product, was to say, okay, how do we make this easy? How do we get more people involved in the budgeting process? Because the more people we get involved, like the closer to the action, the better our numbers are going to be. They're going to be more meaningful, as well as if people enter their own numbers, they're going to be more accountable for it. And ultimately, the reason you're doing a budget is to see where you're going and to also, provide some accountability into your business. So what we did is we basically took Excel as a user interface. Most people love using Excel for budgeting, but there's a whole bunch of issues that you have with Excel, especially when you start getting into, 5, 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 users, because, merging all the spreadsheets and there's no security and control. If somebody changes something, the whole thing becomes a real mess. And I think, probably most of you guys are using Excel for budgeting. So what we've done is we've taken, the Excel interface, but turned it into an enterprise budgeting tool. Okay. The next one is security and controls. And again, you want to make sure that the numbers that are in there are correct, that people are not entering whatever they want. That there's some, ways to manage to make sure that there's a process in place that things get approved. So when everything rolls up and the budget comes up at the corporate level, the numbers make sense and people are accountable for it. And then last but not least, we want to make sure you have good reporting and good access to information. The reason you're doing your budget is to be able to provide people with, budget versus actual numbers based either at their level, at the department level, at the user level, at the corporate level, at whichever point you need. And also you want to provide them with access to information as they're doing their budget to make sure that they get whatever they need to make sure that they put in the best numbers possible. Okay, so those are basically the three main pillars that we used when we built our product, because we thought these were really important in building a budget. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to quickly switch over and just give you guys a high-level overview of what our product does and how it works. Okay, so the first thing is we use Excel as our interface. Just move with this box over. Okay, so we use Excel as our interface, and as mentioned earlier, people love to use Excel. Excel is a very powerful tool and allows you to do a lot of different things. So we thought, okay, let's make that our user experience, but add in all the controls and processes in place to make sure that we have a proper budget and can manage the system a lot better. So we've got normal Excel. All we've done is we've added a tab here that we call True Sky. And if we click on True Sky, we've got three different things here. We've got our hub, which is basically our main area. We've got the ability to have multiple languages, and this is important in Canada because a lot of people are using French. So if you've got any French users, we can manage them. Right now we've got French, English, and Spanish as our languages, but if you need additional languages, we can do that as well. So I'm going to go into my hub, and my hub is my central interface where users basically work with the system. And they've got three different tabs here. So the first one is assignments, and this is per user what they're assigned to do. So in my scenario, I've got to do some administrative budgets. I've got an annual budget, which is my administrative expenses and my travel expenses, and I'm also going to be doing some compensation planning. I've got the ability to send out my reports. So I've got some budget versus actual, some dashboards, and some financial statements. And this is going to be very specific to a user. So depending on who they are, they only get to see certain assignments, certain reports. And then templates is basically where administrator can go and build their own templates. So this gives us the ability to build our own reports. So I'm going to go to assignments, and I'm going to go to my administrative expenses. One thing you'll notice is we've added a bit of control to the system. So we've got a start date and an end date of when the budget process begins. So we can control, when people start inputting their numbers and when they get closed off. So if you're managing the process, you can say, okay, as of this date, everything's closed off, numbers are not changing. Okay. So I'm going to go click on my numbers here, and I'm going to open up my template. So basically right now I'm going out there, and the system is building my template for me. And it just takes a second to come up. The way we build this, we give you multiple options. On our first page, we usually put in some instructions. What is this administrative expense process? How to navigate through the system. What are some of our rules around this? So we can enter values in the yellow shaded areas, and keep in mind that anything greater than 20% is not going to be acceptable. So people do budget once a year typically. Some companies do quarterly, some companies do monthly, but it's not something they do every day. So we like to put some information when they go into the system. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and input information. And as soon as I do that, I get some filters. And again, depending on who you are and how you build your system, we can define these to be built for your own company. So in this scenario, we've got some departments. So if I click on my filters, it basically defines which departments I'm entering my budget for. And again, we've got security around this. So if I only have one or two departments that I enter my budget for, then that's all that shows up. If it's only one, then automatically that shows up for you. We've also got the ability to do kind of roll-ups. So in this scenario, we've got locations, and I can start rolling things up. This is really more for reporting purposes. That we've got the ability to say, okay, roll everything from my Vancouver office into my Vancouver location, or I can roll this up into Canada, or I can roll this up into North America. So we've got the option in how we want to roll things up or roll things down. We've also got the ability to do version control, as well as we've got the ability to have multiple currencies. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and retrieve my data, and this is going to go and build my budget for me, or my template. So I've got my template, and basically it's an Excel spreadsheet. But you'll notice a few things. We've got certain things in yellow. This is where we can enter information. And anything that's grayed out, we can't. So we basically lock something down. So we can't change anything that we don't want to. We've got full control over our spreadsheet. Now, the nice thing is we've got the ability to do everything you can do in Excel. So I can just go and enter a number. I can do that, that nice drag and drop, whatever you call it. It'll go and fill things in for me. If I want to do a formula, it'll be just, take this number plus this number. So we're basically giving you the ability to do a lot of the Excel functionality that we have. Okay. If you use certain things in Excel, for example, if we use our conditional formatting, we can do that. It'll take advantage of all that functionality as well. So we've given you the ability to keep everything that's good in Excel, but taking away some of the things that are not so good in Excel for budgeting. Okay. So some of the things that we've done to make budgeting easier in Excel is we've given you the ability to have a bunch of data tools. And data tools allow us to basically enter a budget but make things easier. A lot of companies out there do a lot of spreading based on certain criteria. So we've given you the ability to spread based on numbers. We can pre-configure things based on seasonality. If you've got high seasonality, low seasonality. We can also do spreading based on budgets or actuals. So for example, over here, let's say I want to do some spreading based on last year's numbers. I can take that and I can put in, let's say I want to spread $30,000 evenly. It'll do that for me automatically. But if I want to do it based on last year's actuals, I can just click on actuals and it'll go through and replace it based on last year's actuals. So as you can see, it'll start, low, high, and then low. Okay. You'll also notice we've got the ability to attach graphs. So we've taken advantage of some of that. So we've got the ability to, give some users some, ability to see how they compare against last year, how they want to see things, and so forth. Okay. We've also added the ability to do some things that we can't really do very easily in Excel. So right now you've got a budget here for these numbers of $41,000, but you've gone through and you've spent a lot of time and effort saying, okay, I want to build this in certain ratios. I like what my numbers are. But the reality is my boss is only going to give me $35,000. In Excel, it'd be very hard to go through every cell and figure out, okay, how do I reallocate this? We've given you the ability to say, okay, go and spread this based on my budget. And I can say my budget is going to be $35,000. And if I go and replace that, it'll basically change all those numbers and allocate it to a total of $35,000. So we've kind of given you, some tools to make things easier to even enter data that are outside of Excel. Okay. Another thing that we've done that's a bit unique is we've given you the ability to enter notes. In Excel, you can enter notes, but as most of you guys know, you can right-click and enter a note. But what happens, that note only is traveling with that spreadsheet. So if you merge multiple spreadsheets, those notes go away. Certain users cannot see those notes and so forth. So what we've done is we've given you the ability to enter a note to any field, and that data will travel with that field. The other thing we've done with the note is we can actually provide you more information. So saying, okay, this is a note. And then we've also given you the ability to add attachments. So if you've got a business case or some other information that needs to be attached to that note, we can do that as well. And those notes will travel with the system all throughout. So any user that either approves a certain number or any user that needs to see the notes, 6 months later, they'll be attached with this, basically with this intersection, which is going to be my 2018 budget for my supplies hardware account. So anywhere that intersection shows up in any of the reports or any of the templates, that note will be attached in there. So it just gives you the ability to travel, and move things around a lot easier. The other thing is we can basically also, attach, documents. So in this case, I've got a quote that relates to that note. So as we go through our budgeting process, people can see what things are happening. Okay. So that's a little bit on our interface and how things are entered in TrueSky. Again, because we're using Excel, we made things very easy and giving the user the ability to do a lot of the things they can in Excel, but we've added a whole bunch of controls on what they can enter and what they can see. Okay. The next thing is going to be security and controls. I'll just call this back up. So actually, let me just close this. So on the security and control side of things, the one thing that we've done that's really important is we've given the ability to have audit trails. So if I click on my audit trails for this field, basically it'll give you a record every time this record has been changed, who's changed it, who the user was, and when it was done. If we're bringing in data from other systems, we track that as well. The other nice thing we do is we've got the ability to say, okay, I like this number better. I can go back here and automatically update it. So as a user, you've got the control or the confidence that the numbers you've entered are the ones, that are in the system. And if anybody changed them, you've got the ability to see, okay, who changed it, when they changed it. And if, if there's a reason for it, they can always add a note. And then we can say, okay, why did they change those numbers? Okay, which is a big thing. As I mentioned earlier as well, we can lock a cell. So if a user tries to enter something into a cell, it's completely locked down. We've also given you the ability to have some rules and guidance. You'll notice certain fields change here, like this number, this over here changed from green to red to yellow. So we've got the ability to give some visual cues for people when they're entering numbers around what are some of the rules and guidances. If you remember when I first went in there, one of the rules was that if my budget is over 20%, it's going to be disallowed. So if my numbers are 20% over last year's, automatically we'll turn this into red. If the numbers are between 10 and 20%, we're going to put a yellow there. So we're going to have an indicator saying, this is a warning. You're above the 10% that we wanted, but you're still below the 20%. So we're going to allow you to enter this. And green means, okay, whatever numbers you've entered, they're fine. They're below our 10% requirements. And this is something that you can define yourself. And we can control whether the user can submit this for approval or not. So, depending on how your workflow is and what your philosophy is, if somebody goes over the 20%, we can say, you know what, don't even bother submitting it because we're not going to approve it. Or in some scenarios, we'll say, okay, you can submit it, but you better have a really good reason, and you better have a good explanation on why you're going over the 20%. So again, we've got visual cues to make things easier and to make sure that the numbers make sense and that people don't enter the wrong numbers. We also have a very strong workflow engine that's built into the tool that allows us to define, who gets approved and how the approval process is going to work. And it's just not a linear workflow, so we can kind of have things, go to multiple people to approve and then kind of merge back. So we've got full flexibility in how we want to have our workflow, who approves what, and how things go through the process. Okay. And then last but not least is we've got, how we access this information. How do we do our reporting? how we grab the information. Actually, sorry, I just got to go back in here. I want to show you one more thing on here. Okay, hold on. Just give me 1 second. I'm not sure why this stopped working. Okay, this, I guess somehow it always happens in demos that we access some of the data.
All right, no problem.
I just closed it down a little bit too early. Okay, one of the things I want to show you as far as access to data is there's a lot of situations where you basically have a GL account. So for example, here I've got my employee training account, and you want to have additional information that you don't want to track in your GL, but you want to track it as part of your budgeting process. So in here I've got some employee training, and I've got a couple different events. If I want to, I can go add, what we call a line item detail. That's another line item on the event. So say, saying we're going to have some True Sky training, and it's going to be, we're going to spend, $2,000 this month and $1,000 next month, and so forth. And what happens is those numbers will roll up, and they'll give you, as far as your budget is concerned, you're going to have a number of 4,500 that we can compare against last year, but your details are going to be below it. So you'll be able to see, okay, who's going to be part of that employee training or whatever additional information you want. So it gives us the ability to expand on your GL without having to create a whole bunch of GL accounts, but still track all that information in your budget. A lot of companies, what they do right now is they have separate spreadsheets to do that or have it in a separate process. So it's just nice to have it all in one place. The other thing we have is we've got the ability to drill down on data. So if we look at our numbers here, last year I've got $37,000 worth of actual numbers. If I want to see what makes up that number, we've got the ability to create a link and go in and actually see what those transactions are. So in this scenario here, I'm opening up my transactions for certain GL accounts for a certain time period, but I can go drill down into any system and get any data that I want, as long as that data is available to me. In a lot of the budgeting tools, what you need to do is you need to bring all the data into that budgeting tool. With TrueScout, we actually do calls into other systems. So whether it be an HR system, could be an order entry system, could be a sales automation system, customer relationship management system. We can go data from multiple places. In this scenario here, what we've done is we've gone into certain accounts, and I can see, okay, here's my accounts for a certain time period. Here's all the transactions. Once I go in there and I get that data, I can start manipulating it. So I can say, okay, show me these from high to low, from low to high. I can say, show me just my top 10. So here's my top 10. I can clear it up. If I want to start analyzing it further, I can say, you know what? I want to start analyzing this, but I want to see, okay, what is my account description? So I want to group it by account description, and I want to see the vendor names. Because I'm looking at certain accounts, and I'm looking at my software supply account, and I said, okay, something was off in that account. It looked a little bit high, so I'm going to go and expand it, and I can see, okay, I've got transactions for 5 different vendors, and I can see there were 2 things in mobile warehouse. Something doesn't look right there, so I can go look at it, and I can say, you know what? We actually bought a tablet, and we put it into the wrong account, so it went into the software supply account. So we can actually start drilling down and looking at your GL data or whatever data you want as part of our budgeting process. So when you're building a budget, you can say, okay, what were in those numbers last year? Am I going to have the same thing this year? And you can start kind of budgeting and moving things around. We also allow you to link into other systems. So if you have some kind of HR database or some kind of HR system that basically says, here's all my compensation rules. Here's my rules for doing this or doing that. We can actually go in there so that people can actually go and access other systems from within the budgeting process to get whatever information they need. Okay. It's a very powerful tool to be able to go into your systems and get all that kind of data. And then last but not least, I'm going to show you some reporting. So I'm just going to go into my hub again. And I'm going to go look at my reports. And I've got the ability to create financial statements. So I'm going to go look at my corporate financial statement. This is just a very high level statement. We can do, pretty well any kind of statement that you want. We can do income statement, balance sheet, statement of changes, or any kind of reporting one out of the system. So in this scenario, we're going to be doing the reporting for our admin department for our Toronto location. So I'm going to go ahead and get my data. And this is going to generate my income statement for me. Okay. So in this scenario, we've got a high-level income statement, but I can start, breaking it up into more detail. So I can kind of break it up into, subtotals, whatever. And I can also start expanding my columns. So in this scenario here, I've got my actuals and I've got a forecast. With our system, we've got the ability to, have rolling forecasts automatically generated by the system. So, if I come into April, once I close off April, it'll put in my actuals and it'll continue with my forecast for the rest of the year. We've also, in this scenario, we've got our budget, and then we've got our variance. So we can go through, and add as many columns as you want, expand the report in any way you like. And because we're using Excel kind of as our interface, we've got the ability to have all the controls and all the font controls and colors and all that stuff to make this, into statements that you can generate and send out to the public. Okay. Just close this one off. And the other kind of report we can do as well is we can do some simple dashboarding. Now, we're not a full-blown BI tool, but we take advantage of the Excel functionality for creating dashboards. Excel has a whole bunch of out-of-the-box dashboarding that we can do. So we take advantage of that so we can kind of create, nice little charts and nice little graphs, and so forth. So here's some financial numbers and, here's some sales numbers. We can take advantage of some of the mapping functionality that's within Excel and so forth. So it's just again, we're trying to leverage Excel as much as we can, but we've added as much controls and processes in place to turn Excel into a full-blown enterprise budgeting tool. Okay, so that's kind of it for the high-level overview. Are there any questions?
Let me just check the chat there, George.
I've gone fairly quickly, but I just wanted to give you guys a high-level view. Just, there's a lot we can do. We have a lot of functionality built into our product. We built it to be able to use it, from smaller clients, like people that have 5, 10 people in the budgeting process, all the way to larger enterprise.
All right, I've unmuted everybody. So if anybody has a question, feel free to ask. Remember, you're being recorded here. I hope that's okay. Otherwise, you can put it in the chat.
On the dashboard tab, is it possible to also add certain balance sheet accounts like receivables, payables?
Yes. Yeah, we can, as long as we have access to the data, and our system is built pretty open-ended, we can bring in whatever information we need from other systems. So, we have customers that do some, sales forecasting. So basically based on products, based on customers. We do have customers that, that will put some receivable information in there as well, payable information and so forth. As long as the data is there, we can go get at it.
So whatever is available in our accounting system.
In your accounting system or other systems as well. Because we can either bring the data into our system to do the reporting on it, or we can go and get it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a pretty strong point that this could be connected to. Some people may have other islands of data that may not even be in the accounting system, right, George? And you may, for whatever reason, want to pull that. I mean, whether it's a CSV file or maybe HR and payroll, if it's a separate or hosted system, maybe some sort of a custom inventory system. Some people we've come across point of sale numbers. We have clients that have point of sale that they're not necessarily pulling all the data into their accounting side, but they may want to use it for budgeting and planning, on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis.
We're trying to CRM systems, so for sales information as well.
Right.
Compensation or sales or sales commission, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good one. And did we talk about multiple companies? If people have multiple entities in their Sage 300, you can certainly use this to consolidate the tool, right? That was one of the questions.
Yeah, we can do that. Ideally, they should have the same GL account structure or some kind of symmetry around that to make it a lot easier, but we can do that.
Right.
It gets tricky with different year ends and so forth, but again, we can manage that. We've got a lot of flexibility and control on what we can do.
Okay. Got a question here. I know this is always a hard one to answer on the fly, but roughly a time to do deployment, assuming everybody's set up and, whether they're, maybe 1 or 2 companies, and assume those companies have a GL structure that's similar. What's the typical deployment time look like, George?
Typically, we've done implementations probably like from 4 to 6 weeks, kind of on the low end, to, some larger ones that are, could go like, 6 months, maybe a bit longer. It all depends on the complexity of the templates, how many people are involved. A lot of times the challenge is more on the client side, making some decisions, are we changing our process at all? What do we want our templates to look like? Who gets to see what information? That kind of stuff. So once those decisions are made, the rest of it's fairly easy, but it's just, we need client input to make sure, and then we also need to make sure everything's tested and the integration is all, everything's balanced out. So it's time-wise, typically it can take, for a small implementation, it's like, 6 weeks, and then you can go from there up.
Yeah, and by 6 weeks, you mean on the calendar, not necessarily
on the calendar,
total billable time. You're working with people off and on during those weeks and giving them homework to do and come back with, and then you implement and test and go for it. It's much like an ERP implementation in some respects.
It's very similar.
Yeah, because in some cases we have clients where this is very complex. Others are much less complex, but it's certainly automated.
And it also, some of it depends on what areas they're implementing. Like most clients typically start with financial budgeting, which is fairly straightforward. but then afterwards they can move into different areas. Compensation gets more complex. If they get into commissions, it gets very complex depending on the commission structure.
Right.
You can do capital expenditure. So typically these projects grow, but most people start with financial budgeting, which is fairly straightforward and simple, and then you kind of go from there.
Yeah, and you also get some time back, aside from all the other benefits. Now you're getting time back that you can put towards other types of budgeting, because you're not spending weeks and weeks just trying to figure out your budget at budget season, right? Or
Right.
trying to do your monthly budgets or quarterly budgets. It's the press of a button basically now.
Yeah, we're trying
Send
to
out the
eliminate
email.
a lot. We're trying to eliminate a lot of the administrative functions of a budget. So, let's say if you've got 10 or 20 people in a budgeting process right now, you've got to roll out 20 spreadsheets and you've got to manage all that. So in our scenario, we can create one template that can be rolled out to 20 people, and then they're only going to see what they're supposed to see.
Right.
So it's a much easier process. And like you said, we eliminate a lot of the administrative time. So you actually have time to analyze and spend time at making sure the budget makes sense and everybody agrees to it and everyone's accountable for it.
Right. All right. Let me just check one more time. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to speak up now or put your question in the chat window. I think I answered all. Let me scroll down here. I think I asked all the ones that were put in here. So basically, for anybody, the next steps are give us a call here at DNA. Give me a call. If you want to have a further discussion about how this might help your organization, how we might go about it, and we can get George's team on the line and have a chat about what you want to do and do a review and plan the time frame and costing. But once that's done, George's team are very good at not only helping you sort out what your budget process is, because it may change, right, George? What you're doing today, because of the way you have to do it, you may be able to streamline even the process and the types of calculations of budgeting you're trying to do with many spreadsheets and sending out to managers. You may even have greater opportunities to do more reporting and more budgeting that you never even thought about before. So it's even good to have that chat. But once we start that, we're happy to get George's team involved. They're very good. They're very knowledgeable on this side of it. And for anybody that is, you'll see an email shortly about our customer event coming up in Ottawa. In Montreal, we're having one in Montreal this year for the first time on October 29th on Monday, and here in Ottawa on October 30th at the Science and Tech Museum. George's one of George's team members, I think Alan's going to be joining us again, and he'll have a presentation there as well. So if it's the middle of budget season, you can't have a chat with us now, plan for the end of October and come see it live and have a chat with True Sky team members that'll be here. All right, well, this time, I did get one question. Can the planning of the budget be imported into the budget in Sage? Oh, that's a good question.
Yes, we can either do the reporting out of our system, so we can bring in the actuals and do the budgeting out of our side, or we can move that information back into Sage and you can do the reporting out of Sage. It's up to you how you guys want to do it. Right.
So you can feed this data back into any of the budget sets if you were of the 5 budget sets in Sage 300 if you wanted to, or pull it out and do it all here. And it's totally up to you. They'll work with you on the pros and cons. We'll work with you on the pros and cons of both and make a decision on how to move forward. And you can always change it after. So with some effort.
That's the thing. Price.
Yeah. So the pricing is based on the number of users, basically, plus how complex the setup's going to be for the services side. Right, George?
Yes. And we've tried to keep our pricing pretty simple. So we've got 3 types of users. We've got a full-blown user that basically can do everything and enter data and do the reporting and everything else. We've got an approval-only user that basically allows you to do approvals and get some reporting, and then a reporting-only user. So depending on how you're structured and how you want things. The pricing, the range per user, we've got 2 options there. We've got a subscription user and a perpetual. Subscription is kind of like a rental model. And a full-blown user is $9.98, and perpetual users are just under $2,000 per user. That's on the full-blown side of things, just to give you an idea.
Does that answer give you the range, Camila? So the subscription is $9.98 a year for that full user, and then the perpetual
Sorry, $948.
or $9.48. I'm sorry, yeah, $9.48, and then the perpetual is you pay the larger upfront fee and then a smaller annual fee to stay current with the software.
Yeah, maintenance fee.
Yeah. Yep, she says good.
Okay.
All right. Well, the cost of the overall system, if you're evaluating this, especially if you've just gone through a budget process, because we have a lot of clients that they just were pulling their hair out, a lot of them at this time of year because they have a fiscal year end on the calendar year, and the savings after the fact is days, if not weeks, of people's time, which and because it's so onerous, they may only do it once a year or review it, in detail once a year. Now they can not only do it quickly, with relative ease to the finance team as well as all the managers of all the departments that need to fill up the data on the budgets, but they can now do it more often, easier to prepare for board meetings if you happen to have those sort of things. So the payback just kind of grows over time as you realize what you can do now much easier that you probably never even thought about before because of the time required and the effort required for the project. So please consider what you're doing today, what you might like to do in the future, and put that time frame and the cost of that time and not doing other work at that time, balance that with the cost of the project and how much more effective you'd be. So it makes it a very good process for people that have this kind of budgeting need. Well, George, go ahead.
Sorry, we've got a very simple ROI calculator on our website, but basically it's a very expensive process. As you mentioned, there's usually a lot of people that are involved. It's very time consuming. It's senior people, and it goes over a long period of time, and a lot of it is very administrative. So we've tried to remove all that, really streamline it. So we're typically we're finding that we're saving at least like 50% of the time of the budgeting process.
Yeah.
So you can take that time and make better use of it. Move the administrative into actual, time where you spend managing the process and making sure you understand what the numbers are and make sure they make sense.
Yeah, and I think some of the clients have even said to us, our budgeting is probably even more accurate now because of the tools you provide to allow us to really sit down and think about what that future budget's not going to be, and as opposed to just trying to, you can look back and look forward and you have options now on how you want to put those numbers together rather than just, kind of throw a dart at the wall and put a percentage uplift on it or whatever your process may be. So I think it also gives people the ability to be more accurate, hopefully, in their planning, or look at how accurate they were in the past, and going forward, try and improve that accuracy. So it's again a better financial control all around.
I saw there was another question popped up.
Yeah, Patricia, I'll get in touch with you. Not a problem. I'll reach out to you and we can plan a time with George's team to have a demonstration. And that, again, if anybody would like to talk one-on-one about this, this is an information session just to give you a taste. There's a whole lot more we can do with George and his team to show you the details and maybe focus on some specific areas that your business may be interested in your budgeting process. So I'll reach out to you on that. Not a problem. And anybody else, please just, like I said, you'll get an email with the recording from me. You can just reply back if you got any other questions or you want to set up some more discussions or just call the office and we'll be happy to provide you with info. And on that note, I am going to make myself the presenter again. And just want to say thank you to George for attending, providing the session, providing the great information and the insight into what True Sky Budgeting and Planning with your Sage 300 Cloud is the new name is. The same product, Sage 300 Cloud is just the new name Sage has put on it. But I really encourage you to have a look at this, have a look at some of the new features in Sage 300 Cloud, and get in contact with us here at DNA and if you want to have more discussion. So thanks again, George. I'm sure we'll do this again, and anybody who wants to come to our events at the end of October, you'll be able to get a chance to see that too. So I think I'll pause now